Hey, what's going on, everyone? True Techno Gamer, back at it. Thank you for joining the channel. This is part 2 of my series that I said I would do on the next frontier for my home theater journey, room treatments, okay? So in part 1, if you haven't seen it, please check it out. I'll put a card to it up here. I talked about the motivation in terms of what I wanted to try to achieve. There were 3 kind of key pillars that I identified, right? Getting a more intimate, focused sound from my listening experience that will kind of draw me in. A more personal sound is kind of what I'm talking about. And number 2 was better dialogue clarity, not feeling the need to have to turn up the volume so I can hear things on the center channel or any of the channels. And then part 3 was getting a more smooth, even bass distribution where my seating area is primarily a null now, and I seem to be missing out on some things. So if I can smooth that out, tame some of the excessive peaks in around the room, hopefully we can get a better balance there. Those are the 3 things I called out there. This video, we're going to talk about what the plan is. All right, so I got some stuff. We're going to get into it. I'm going to show you guys what I plan to do, how I got to this point, how I got to this plan. I still, have opportunity. Please give me feedback. This needs to be a dialogue. I know there's a lot of people in my shoes here, so let me know what you're thinking, if things make sense, if you have any other ideas. And then in part 3, it'll be the results. I'll get everything up, and I'll do measurements. I'll have some listening impressions and let you guys know if it actually worked or not. So please join me for this exciting journey into room treatments and getting to that Endgame home theater. All right, so welcome. Let's get into it. So what is the plan right now? I talked a little bit about this in part 1. I took some time for the last probably month or 2, been just doing a lot of research, been paying attention more in my room, been doing some measurements with Rue and stuff like that. And I have a partner. So what am I planning to do? Well, I'm obviously going to get more room treatments. This all started with me reaching out and checking out the website of none other than GIK Acoustics, okay? GIK Acoustics is one of the most reputable names in room treatments for home theaters, for studios, or even commercial areas, whatever have you. They are a great company for this stuff. I'll definitely have a link to it in the description of this video. But check out their website, check out their YouTube. They have a ton of educational tutorials and explainer videos on all aspects of treating a room, that kind of stuff. So I kind of started going down that path and checking out their stuff. And then probably the best thing about them, guys, they have a free consultation service that is actually amazing, right? So I saw this on their website. I filled out the form and I got an email back. So shout out to Ryan at GIK. He's the one that I've been talking to. We've been talking back and forth for, again, about a month or more now. Emails, videos, photos. I sent them photos, I sent them videos of the room, told them what I was thinking, told them what my concerns were. I mean, he was super helpful. He came back, he did a 3D scan of my room. He came back with data. They ran it through their software that showed what the room modes are in this particular space, what frequencies they'll be at. Man, I mean, it was so much data. This is all just free. We're just emailing. It was amazing. And it was super helpful for me to validate some of the things that I already was thinking. Because he also just said, hey, if I was in your shoes, this is what I would do. Here's a low budget. Here's a medium budget. Here's a high budget. I mean, he laid it out. So shout out to Ryan, man. I really appreciate you. And all the folks at GIK have been super helpful. I put in an order for a bunch of room panels, sound panels from GIK, and I got it within about a week. They all were here. So can't say enough good things about them so far. So, and I say so far because I still got to get them up, actually hear what they do, see if they actually work, right? But Ryan's like, okay, your room's going to be fire once you do all of this stuff, right? So without further ado, let's take a look. All right, so like I said, the stuff is here. I put in a shipment for a bunch of different panels. I'll go over the details with you guys, but they came, like I said, within a week. And here's kind of the layout of mainly what I'm working with here, right? So we got the GIK, everything came packaged super well. I'm not gonna go through a full unboxing. I haven't even unboxed all of them yet. I'm not gonna be able to put all of that stuff up now quite yet, but I will over the next couple of weeks. And then, like I said, I'll do a part 3. But for now, I just wanted to take a look and see what some of this stuff actually looks like. So this right here, my friends, if you're familiar with GIK, is a 244 panel. It's a bass trap. Basically a broadband bass trap. So it's a full frequency, does absorption for everything up to I think 10 kilohertz, down to about 80 hertz for getting a lot of that bass. I'll go into why I picked that. And then over here is an alpha panel that looks very much similar to, and I'll show you guys this later, but if you haven't seen my other videos, I already have some alpha corner bass traps in my room for now. So this is basically the all-wall versions of that. And I got a bunch of these. So the idea here is they're kind of similar to these. They have a thick absorption layer, but these are hybrid panels. These are hybrid absorption and diffusion panels. So on the front here is a scatter plate. And the scatter plate design is completely intentional. This is a one-dimensional scatter plate. So you see how the lines are. It's kind of going to scatter sound out that way vertically. But it also has an absorption layer in between. The idea here is it's going to absorb a lot of like the mid-range frequencies and even down to some of the bass frequencies, but it's also going to reflect a lot of the high frequencies, but do so in an actual mathematical calculated pattern to give you the best sense of dispersion without it being problematic for how the echoey sound that you typically would get when you just have high frequency sounds reflecting off walls. So it's a more directed, purposeful scattering of the sound that should alleviate the problems with the reverb and echoey sound that you get, but still absorb a lot of the mid-range frequency, which is responsible for the dialogue clarity in particular, right? So it should help with the clarity, it should help with some of the bass, but also keep a liveliness to the sound. One of the common problems that a lot of people do when they get into room treatments is they over-treat their room. They use only these big, thick absorption panels and everywhere. You can't even see any wall left, right? They just throw it everywhere. And now the sound is just dead. Everything, and you want to have some reflection, you want to have some liveliness to your sound, right? So ideally, you want to do a good balance of absorption and diffusion if you can. With a lot of the better treated rooms, you'll see that. Even if they have a ton of panels, you'll see it might be absorption, diffusion, like, they kind of alternate it. So that's kind of what the main things I got here. I got different shapes and, sizes and stuff like that. But essentially, I'm basically working with these two styles. And yeah, man, I mean, they are definitely extremely well built. I'm actually really impressed. The unboxing, like they felt like there were a lot of care into them. And so the next thing I want to do is just take a quick look at how these compare to the panels that I already have up on the wall. All right, so here is an example of the two panels side by side. So these panels are my existing panels. I got them from Acoustic, I believe is what they're called. They're, again, another reputable company in the space. They do some pretty good panels. You can clearly see the difference though, right? In the overall look. These are obviously more blacked out. They actually are a little bit taller, even though they're both supposed to be 48 inches. But the more interesting part is when I turn them sideways for you guys. So check this out. All right. So if you can see that, quite a big difference there in terms of the thickness. Okay. Why? I'm gonna go into that. But these are 2-inch panels, and these from the full side are actually about 5¼ inches. And the other cool thing about these is they actually have an air gap, as you can see. So the actual panel, if you can see this here, is about 4 inches thick. And then there's about 1¼ inch. So this kind of wood piece here that's sticking out is for this air gap. The idea is when you hang these on the wall, the sound is going to hit the panel, and then some of it is going to get through the panel and then reflect back off the wall, increasing the overall distance that the sound has to go. So it's gonna go through the panel for 4 inches thick, hit the wall, travel another 1.25 inches, hit the wall, reflect back off the wall, another 1.25 inches, and then have to go back through the panel, right? So it basically, it doesn't quite double, but it increases the effectiveness of a panel, meaning that the panel can actually be as effective as a thicker panel. So even though there's only 4 inches of actual fiberglass material in here, it can function closer to something probably closer to like 6 inches, right, thickness, right? So it's a pretty cool, kind of just like optimization technique. And all of the 244 panels that I got have that air gap just to increase how much they can actually absorb. So that's a pretty cool thing. Okay, so now let me just talk about what the plan is and why I approached it. And then I'm going to show you guys around the room and kind of generally what I'm planning to do in terms of placements, okay? Now, there was a couple obvious things about my room that were problematic in terms of the acoustics that Ryan immediately, caught on to, right? Even without being in the room and seeing the room, okay? The first thing that he actually latched onto was the idea of the fact that I really didn't have any bass treatments in this room, okay? I do have the corner alpha, like I said, that was actually my last addition in terms of this room treatments, but it's just one corner, right? And it's just, I have 2 stacked up, but it's just one corner over there. Other than that, I have no bass treatments in here. And that was the first thing he caught on to, because he said, look, you're going to have a lot of issues with the room modes and just the overall sense of balance in your sound, which is something that I can tell. And so the bass treatments is interesting to me because that's probably the one area that I would say I'm kind of going into more cold, right? Like I don't have a sense of how valuable bass treatments can really be in a room, and it's going to be interesting for me to hear if that makes a difference at all. The idea though is that typically it's harder to just pick up on the sound difference with bass traps. But historically, this is the interesting thing for me. I always thought that bass traps were kind of like just something to avoid, to be honest, because I always was told that bass traps are going to absorb bass, which gives you the impression that there's less bass in your space, there's less bass coming from the subwoofer and from your speakers. And generally speaking, that's not what we want at all, right? Like most of us, right, are trying to find ways to maximize the bass. But it turns out that, that's kind of not the right way to look at with bass traps, the value of bass traps, right? They're not necessarily taking away more, just bass for the sake of taking away bass. The bass that you're meant to hear is still going to be there. Hopefully, it's going to be more directed to you in your ears and your listening position. The idea for bass traps is, most of you guys probably know, is to absorb the excessive bass, particularly in the corners, but also throughout all the walls and ceilings and whatever. Is you want to be able to absorb the excessive bass. The idea is change the amplitude of some of those peaks and nulls, because you ideally want a even more flat bass response. Like I said, that's what I want. In general, it's apparently a very, very important thing. And he said probably the first step to getting a good sounding room is start treating bass. So I had no real bass treatment other than that one corner alpha in this room. So that was the first thing he said. So to that end, that's why we decided to go with the 244s, because basic mantra is go as thick as you possibly can. The thicker the panel, the deeper frequency is going to be able to absorb. Turns out that these panels that I have now, these 2-inch panels, they're only going to treat down to about 350 hertz, maybe, right? They're going to treat a lot of the upper mids, and the highs to try to tame those reflections. They still do a great job of that. But in terms of bass, now bass is generally considered anything below 200 hertz, right? So anything below 200 hertz is technically bass. Not only the subwoofer bass, not only the infrasonic stuff, but 200, 150, 125, right? So these aren't touching that. These aren't touching those at all. Though that corner alpha apparently is only rated to go down to about 100 hertz, which that's bass. But again, you're not getting into like the really deep subwoofer stuff, right? But that is a actual corner bass trap. That's what it's called. So Ryan's suggestion was go as thick as possible, because I initially was like, I have 2 inches. I was going to go with the 242s because I was concerned that I didn't want things too thick, off the wall, especially in certain parts of the room, stuff like that. Thinking again about the aesthetics and stuff like that. But he's like, okay, well, saying go as thick as you can. So, I looked and talked to the wife and everything, and I wound up saying, okay, you know what? I'm just going to go 244s as much as possible. And then the alphas that I have are also 4 inches thick, which is the thickest. Well, I think that's maybe, I don't know. They may have another one that could go 6 inches, I think maybe, but that's obviously way thicker, twice as thick as these still. So they're going to get some bass too. So everything I did now, all of the panels I have are technically bass traps, right? There, if you go to our GIK website and look at 244 and look at the Alpha Pro 4, they are basically considered a bass trap / absorption panel, and in the case of the Alphas, bass trap / absorption / diffusion. So everything is treating bass, and even if it's not in a corner, because the problem with my room is I don't really have set corners, right? I'll show you guys more. I'm gonna walk through this again, but I don't really have a corner here. I just have that one dedicated corner there in terms of this theater space. The other corners are way out in the back there, and they're not really technically part of the theater. I have other stuff in there. So getting like some, corner bass traps loaded on there, just not really an option. And I told him that, and he's like, okay, well, I would get as much bass traps as you can along the walls so you can try to absorb more bass. So that's what we're doing there, and that's kind of why we got that. And again, that 5 1/4 inches with the air gap, it's going to be a lot more than this. Those 244s are rated to be able to absorb down to 80 hertz, which is pretty cool. That's actually where I have my subwoofer crossed over at. So it's getting a lot of like the lower mid bass, and then getting into the subwoofer range, which again, a lot of wall panels don't get at all, and the alphas even don't, and these definitely don't. So that should be a nice improvement in and of itself. The other thing that he called out, of course, was the fact that, as he said, I have a lot of high frequency energy in my room. Part of that is he's just looking at the shape of the room and the nature of the room. Part of it also is the actual equipment I have. These Paradigm Personas with the beryllium tweeter, really, really like detailed highs, and like I said, they can be very forward and could be bright if they're not tamed properly. So being able to kind of control some of the high frequencies was the other main thing he called out. Of course, to that end, what do? Yes, basically the idea there is just wall coverage. Try to get as much coverage on panels as possible around your walls, absorption panels, to absorb some of that the high frequency energy. Especially in this area here, kind of the main theater area here. So to that end, I'm going to definitely make some adjustments there. And like I said, we'll talk about positioning in a second. And then the other piece that I talked to him about is the dialogue clarity piece, right? That's one of my goals, and he called that out too. Again, more wall coverage, getting that mid-range, reducing those mid-range reflections was going to be a big part of that. So again, we're going to get more wall coverage. Everything I have is going to be able to get down to at least 100, 125 hertz range. So that should be pretty good there. And then obviously he called out a couple of areas of gaps. Clearly I have some gaps in this room, right? So to that point, let me just kind of walk you guys through the room. I'm going to go handheld now and talk about what some of those gaps are and talk about the positioning of the panels. All right, guys. So it's important, I think, to look at the room, and then I can explain, my thought process through this, because I think this is the useful part of this video and what this channel is about. If you're someone that has, again, a regular room, basement, living room, a regular space, you're not working with a dedicated theater space, where can you, put your room treatments? How do you kind of maintain that room still being a living space in some way, without having room panels just dominate everywhere, to get the maximum effect? Now, you look at this room, this is not an optimal space for, in many ways, at least for a home theater, right? Between the size of it and the overall shape of it, I don't have even like a smooth wall on this side, right? Like I don't have 4 full walls. Like I said, I don't have a front right corner there where I can just kind of stack bass traps like I do over there, right? That's an opening that, again, I don't want to put stuff that will protrude too far out. This is a common area to walk back there for my kids. There's a bathroom right there too. So it's a common high traffic area. I can't, that's why my speaker right there is also where it is. Like I can't push it out anymore. This area here with the stairwell, right? Not a dedicated wall. I have a little piece of wall there. This is, I wouldn't even fully call this a corner. I guess it's a little bit of a corner, but again, it's only a half a corner. Again, I don't have a corner, from the theater area. If I'm in my seat, this is what the corner, there's no real corner here. It's open, have a little piece of wall here, have a little tiny nook of a corner here where you see I got my second sub. So again, I can't stack bass traps up here. There's a lot of just weird considerations that I, in my mind, have been struggling with, okay? Now, when Ryan did the 3D scan, he actually showed, in terms of placements, I can look at it and look at this room and see, well, there's only so many places I could put panels. And my question to him was, and what I was trying to get feedback on was, how effective would it be and what panel should I put in these places, I guess, to get the best results? That was really where, I think his input really helped me, right? So one of the first things he called out is essentially right now, okay, let's back up. Right now, I have exactly 5 panels on the wall and then the 2 corner bass traps. So 7 total panels, okay? I have 2 on this wall. You can see here, 2 inches thick. I have 2 slim panels on the sides of the TV there, which I actually like the look. I think it actually, people always say it makes the TV look bigger. They think that they're like speakers or something. But, now he actually pointed out that he didn't really think that I needed panels behind the speakers because the speakers are directional. The sound does spread like a cone, but it doesn't go backwards, right, necessarily. If I was in a small room and I had a wall, like kind of where I'm standing at right now, then there's possibility that the sound would reflect from this back wall and then go back to the front wall potentially. And that's when it might be more useful. But in this space, he was like, you don't really need that. But I just said, I'm just going to leave it. I already have them, so to get a little bit of coverage there. Again, I don't have much wall there. I got that panel pretty much as far as it can go, right, along that wall. The idea was to try to catch the first reflection point from this close speaker here. And then I have the corner trap. So 5 panels on the wall, okay? Now, for a teaser, I'm essentially going to be going from 5 total panels on the wall to 18 panels, right, on the walls around this room, okay? 5 to 18. Okay, and in terms of total panel count, I think it's 18, might be 19. But in terms of total panel count, we go from including those 2 corner bass traps, 7 panels, to now I would be about, I think it's 21 or 22 panels, right? So essentially, I am almost quadrupling the number of panels I have around the space, which means, again, I'm getting a lot more wall coverage. And again, almost all of those panels are also bass traps. So they're going to be able to trap some, especially of the higher end bass, like the mid to high bass levels. So that's quite an improvement, right? We'll see how that looks. Now, the first thing he said, okay, in terms of placements is looking at this wall. The idea here was I'm trying to get the first reflection point here, I guess, from that speaker. And then this one was kind of like, okay, that should catch the first reflection point from the far speaker. That was the idea. No. Again, I did this initially pretty naively. I didn't measure. I didn't pull out a ruler. I didn't pull out the mirrors and all that stuff. It turns out that, this panel in this location is actually right prime in the first reflection point for the center speaker and for the far speaker over there. So he was like, yeah, that panel is definitely doing more harm than good. So his suggestion was just to rearrange the panels and basically double up the panels here. Put a panel here, move the poster, I guess, closer away from the first reflection point, so farther out that way. And so that's a minimum of what I'll do there, okay? In actuality, what I'm actually going to do now is put 3 panels up here. I want to keep the posters as part of the look down here. I like them. I'm going to move the posters to this little piece of a corner, kind of move this poster over there. I'm going to take the Black Panther poster, put it on this side, and then I'm going to have 3 panels in this area here. So panel, panel, panel. Now, I don't have the room to fit these 2 posters and 3 2-foot wide panels. I already measured it because I'm not moving the speaker, okay? Like literally, the speaker is already pretty close to this kind of wall thing here, right? And everything is already calibrated, and wiring and all that stuff is to where the location of the speakers are. So I'm not moving the position of the speakers, okay? So with that said, I'm gonna use a narrow. I'm gonna use a 1 foot wide panel as the third panel, okay? So I'm gonna have panel here, the 2 foot panel here, 2 foot panel here, and then a 1 foot panel here next to the speaker. So this whole section here should cover the first reflection points from all 3 speakers on this wall now, right? And again, they'll be thicker. So that'll be a good thing, okay? So that's one thing I'm dealing with. The other main gap, of course, that he called out is I have nothing on my ceilings, right? I'm definitely I'm gonna have four of the 2 by 4 foot panels up here. So I'm gonna have plenty of coverage. So kind of right from the center channel, from the center speaker here, kind of around that rough-in, we'll have 2 kind of 4 foot across, so 8 feet in front of it and 8 feet behind it, which kind of gets closer to my seating area. So that should be plenty of coverage. I got the cloud mounting brackets that hang them down from the wall a bit. So for that, to that point, I actually went a little bit thinner because I didn't want them to hang too far. So I got the 242s, which are 3.5 inches, roughly 3.6 inches, something like that. So they're they're not quite as thick. They're not going to be as much in terms of bass trapping, but they're going to still do wonders for the mid-range down to, the 300-ish hertz range. So that should hopefully help with the dialogue clarity piece and the first reflection point on the ceiling. Again, I already have carpeting, so that should help there. Not much is going to change here. I'm going to swap this panel out like the other ones from the 2 inches here to the 244, which are much thicker with the bass trapping. This is as far as I can go right now. I've actually taken the time to do the mirror test from my seating area. And it turns out that, where the speaker is here, because when Ryan looked at this room, he suggested that I try to get a panel beneath the speaker, kind of like in this area here. He generally said that, the stairwell is problematic, of course, and to try to definitely get as much wall coverage as I can over here. Now, it turns out, though, that this area here is not at all a first reflection point to any of these speakers. The first reflection point for this speaker, the close one, is like really at the edge here, like really at the edge, like right around here. But then the first reflection point for the center and for the far speaker actually goes through my stairwell, kind of through the spindle here, and it actually hits the wall all the way on the right side of this light switch, which is actually on the stairs, right? So it's kind of like in this area here is where the first reflection point actually is. So I'm gonna have to get more coverage on here, and I'm gonna try to do it in a way where, again, it still looks somewhat reasonable, somewhat symmetrical. But I am still going to put the panel on the bottom here. That's going to be a 244 because this is kind of a corner, right? So I'm going to try to get something to kind of absorb some of the bass that's in this corner area here. And also just to get more coverage in this stairwell, because right now sound is going to be coming through here and just kind of going all, throughout and getting, it's a problem area. So the more sound I can kind of dead here and prevent from reflecting, ultimately the better, right? And he called it out. This was a really tough one for me, though, because again, I was really concerned about the aesthetics. This is the first thing that people see when they come down here. So, the idea of just having, panels sticking out or something like that, or again, it's a really high traffic area. So, kids, they do that. They run up and down this platform, these stairs. So they bump it in and stuff. I was trying to be mindful of that kind of stuff, but I think it'll work out. I think I have a good plan. So I'm going to have a narrow, because I don't want to be too far and going all into the stairwell. And again, the stairs here has to clear the stairs, is going up. So I'm going to have a narrow 4 foot, 1 foot wide panel, 244 absorption panel to the right of this light switch around here. That's going to basically absorb right through the stairwell here the first reflection point, the true first reflection point of these speakers, right? And get some coverage here. Okay. Ryan actually said I should just get a panel and kind of stand it up on here. And I'm just like, that's not, aesthetically, that's just not going to happen. I'm not going to do that. Right. That would be ideal. I get it. Right. I mean, ideally, I would have a double panel here. It'd be like a panel and a panel, but that's just not an option. So I'm going to have to do it past the spindles onto the wall here. So I'm going to have one there, absorption panel. I'm going to have another narrow here on this side of it, kind of make it kind of more symmetrical. And I'm doing a narrow because this space between the light switch and the speaker, which again isn't moving, is not big enough to accommodate a 2-foot wide panel in this space, right? And then I'm going to still do a panel, a 244 bass trap beneath the speaker, kind of in this area here, right? So there's going to be a good amount more coverage here. Okay. Now, the other piece to this that I think is interesting is the surround speakers, as you guys have seen and I talked about before, are bipole speakers, which I know are they're kind of out of fashion nowadays in the realm of Dolby Atmos. But I still love them. I love the look of them. They're paradigms, so they match, my system well. And I like in a big space like this, I like the idea of having these surround speakers that can project a much wider sound, because I want to be able to fill this space up with sound at times. Now, remember, this is a multifunctional space, all right? I've talked about this a lot on this channel. This is a space that I want it to be a theater. We can sit here, sit on my bar, sit here, sit on the bean bags, and really have a family night or a group night and really have a top tier movie watching experience, okay? I also want to be able to just sit in my chair, which I often do myself, and just have these two beautiful front speakers going and have a top tier music, 2-channel music listening, or 2.1 for me, listening experience. And they can do that. This room can be that. But also, this room is also just a general rec room. There are times where, we might, bring out a folding table. We're playing cards. This is a flip table. So there's a pool table on the other side. I have a ping pong thing that I can put up here. Kids playing games. We play Papa Shot tournaments or whatever. We're back here chilling, got drinks up on the bar. And I just have music playing. And in that situation, this is kind of more of like a lounge club vibe, right? Like I want to be able to, to pump it up and turn up when I want to, and just have sound filling this space as much as possible. So that's where bipoles come in really useful. Everyone says, just get direct. You should have direct. For Atmos, I agree if it was only about, again, the movie experience and having that dedicated thing. But I also like the idea of having that wider dispersion, even for movies, honestly, because I do hear it. It's not as focused, but I do hear a sense that, it's a bigger space coming from the sides and the back, right? But also for that time where I just want to have all the speakers going and playing music and filling up the space to really enjoy it. So that's the key here, right? It's all about the use case, right? So to that point though, this back area, as I pointed out before, is completely untreated. We know that. You probably can hear it already in my voice, is way more echoey, okay? And even the tone of the room, literally the paint, the design, you can see it is meant to be a separation, right? Like that's the theater part. And this is more the rec space, but I obviously do have these speakers up back here. So it is still technically part of the theater part. So I have no treatment back here, right? As you guys can see. Well, it would be good, according to Ryan and other things that I've seen, it would be good to treat this area back here because as you can hear, there's a ton of just reflected sound back here. And again, it obviously affects my ability to really hear these surround speakers. I can hear them, of course, but I mean, like, they don't sound very clear and precise because they're just, the sound is going all over the place, reflecting ceiling, back wall, all over the place, well before. But whatever comes back to my listening area from back there is, again, I can hear the difference in my voice right now. But whatever is getting back to my ear is just completely a mess, right? Like, it's not going to be clear and clean at all. So it still would be good to treat this area back here from what I heard. But like I said, for that third use case of just kind of more of the lounge party vibe, I do want this area to still have some liveliness to it, okay? This back area, the non-black, like painted portion is I don't want to kill and dead all the sound, even talking sound, because most of the talking down here, when we're, just out here chilling, there's a lot of talking going on down here. I don't want it to be completely dead, right? So that's where those diffusion panels are mainly coming in. Now, most people say, Ryan included, that, if you were going to use diffusion panels in your home theater, the back wall is the best place to do it because you want to have a certain amount of clearance to actually get the effect of the diffusion, the scattering, so to speak, right? You need to have some clearance to do that. Obviously, I have plenty of clearance for mine, but also so that your sound isn't completely dead, right? So to that point, I am going to load up this area with a bunch of those diffusion panels. And I'm doing the following. So I'm going to have a narrow diffusion panel, the ones that I showed you guys, on both sides of both of these surrounds back here. So right there, and then right there, and then right there, right flanking that clock, and then right there. So keeping that look that we have with the posters or whatever, but I'm basically going to fill in the gaps in between that with a narrow alpha 4-inch bass diffusion panel. Okay, and the idea there is it's going to absorb a lot of the echoes, right? You probably can hear now, and it's going to absorb a lot of that mid range because that's what those do. But it's going to still keep a lot of the highs in the upper mid range, so it's going to still keep some of the liveliness to it, right? So when we're back here and I have these speakers going, getting that lounge kind of vibe, it's still going to sound somewhat lively. Okay. So I'm going to do those 4 alpha panels because, again, as you can probably see, I don't have the space to fit a 2-foot wide anywhere there, even between the clock and the, again, I don't want it to be too tight and touching up against any of these objects. And I don't want to move the position of these for various reasons. And the other thing I'm going to do is actually beneath the clock here, kind of in between, I'm going to also have another 244 panel, 2 by 3 foot. So it's going to basically, this wall is going to be filled everywhere there's a gap in this space, in this kind of view. Everywhere there's a gap, there's going to have a panel, right? So that should help a lot with coverage. And then I'm also, just because I have them, so these 3 2-inch panels that I already have on the wall, because I still have them, I'm probably going to take at least one of them and just put here, just to, again, get more wall coverage and help with the general reflections back here, right? The other ones I'm probably going to put in my office space, because that's also another untreated area that I do recordings and stuff like that sometimes. So I might just use that. So that's there. The other thing I'm going to do is see this little area here between the side surrounds. I actually am going to have a square shaped 2-foot by 2-foot square panel. So kind of above this refrigerator area and to the left of this surround, and the same deal to the right of that surround. See that wall space there, kind of above that trash and in that kind of nook. I'm going to cover, a good portion, basically this whole middle section here, with an alpha diffuser scatter plate as well. Now, what am I doing with that? I didn't say it earlier, but when I talked about the 3 panels, I'm going to have 2 244s here, move that poster up there, like I said, away from the first reflection area. But then here, I'm going to have a narrow, because it needs to be narrow, but I'm going to have an alpha panel here. I'm not going to just have a 244 here. Why am I doing that? Because these bipolar speakers, as you can see, they have a tweeter and a small mid-range on both sides. The idea of how they work is that they're projecting a wide cone of sound, and a lot of the impression that you hear of the larger sound from these things comes from them reflecting off the wall. Okay, so this speaker here is going to project sound kind of all directions out this way, but a good amount of it is going to come and hit this wall and reflect, and that's part of what you generally would hear with a bipolar or dipole speaker to get that extra sense of space. To that point, because I have bipolar speakers, I don't want to necessarily dead, the entirety of that reflected sound. That's kind of how these speakers work by design, to give you that sense of larger space, right? So if I have, like right now, I actually do, right? I have that 2-inch there, but if I had a, 244 4-inch, absorber here, and had an absorber here, because I wanted to put something on this wall, again, just thinking about wall coverage. But if I use an absorber here, I could be completely wrong in this, guys. And I talked to Ryan about this, and he, he suggested I just use an absorber to try to get the highs. But again, the alphas are still going to absorb a good amount. They're just going to focus more on the mids, which is what I want for the dialogue clarity. But I just like the idea, the thinking at least, that the sound coming from the sides of these bipoles are not going to be completely absorbed. right? With the alphas, they're going to absorb a good amount, right? And again, clean up the dialogue, but still keep some of that reflected energy for the high. But again, with that diffuser plate, the scattering pattern is actually much more controlled. So the impression is if I have an absorber here with that scattering plate coming out horizontally like this, it's actually going to point straight to my seating area here. Okay. So the idea is it's going to reflect sound, but it's going to do it again in a more controlled way. And it should be more directed towards my seating area here instead of just having it scatter, kind of chaotically all around the wall and ceiling and, whatever, right? That could only be a good thing in terms of what I actually hear and perceive from my main listening area is my thought there, right? Similarly, in this back area here, right now, this is a really weird space, right? This is all reflective surfaces, though. This is a wall. This is kind of a wall. This is also reflective. So any sound coming from this thing right here is going to go bam, 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 just all over the place here and then come out of here. It kind of gets lost. A lot of it probably doesn't really get back to my listening ear at all. But the idea here is, bam, have a 2 by 2 foot panel here, fill in much of this wall space, but have it be able to scatter. And the idea here is, it's going to absorb a lot of that. But if you notice from my second row here, when I'm sitting here or someone is sitting here, it's right in front of that wall area, right? Same thing over here, right in front of that wall area here. So the thinking is, keep that scattering, get the diffusion panel, and that scatter is going to be coming directly to this second row area here. But then, from back here, it's still going to, be something that we can hear and still keep some of that liveliness too. And that's why I'm doing the same thing here. The side panels, the narrows on the back, they're both going to be flanking the back speakers here, and they're going to still be diffusion, right? To scatter the sound, the high sound, but still absorb a lot of hopefully the echoey sound that you would hear in the mid-range. So the idea is to kind of, get the effectiveness that I want to get from absorption and achieve my goals, dialogue clarity, bass smoothness, and stuff like that, more intimate sound, but not to kill or really change the functions of this space, right? That's the idea. And I think this is the best way to do that, okay? So if you were to go and add up everything I said, so ultimately, there's going to be 4 panels along that wall. Now there's only 2. There's going to be 4 panels on the ceiling now, right? There's going to be, if you include that panel there on the wall, there is going to be a total of 5 panels now along this wall. Right now there is 1, and there's going to be 5 now back there. And then just looking at this view here, there's now going to be 5 panels straight on the back. And then, like I said, at least 1 2 by 4 foot on the wall there. Probably horizontal to get the most coverage. So 6 panels now back here. That's pretty much everywhere that I can reasonably put a panel. And that's kind of inconsistent with what that 3D scan did. The only gap still, I guess, is in having like floor to ceiling bass traps, which, like I said, I just really can't do without it being very obtrusive. Right? Like in a certain space. But I'm gonna have all of these bass traps along the walls. That should hopefully help, right? So there you have it, man. That's the positioning. That's the plan, man. So let's go wrap it up. All right, guys. Thanks for following me on this journey. I laid it all out for you guys now, right? Again, a really untraditional type room that, again, is pretty common for a lot of regular folks. Non-dedicated home theater space. How can you help increase, the sound quality, and then ultimately, hopefully, my enjoyment of it, your enjoyment of it. This is the plan. So again, I'm going from 7 total panels to, roughly 21 total panels down here, going from, 5 on-wall panels in total to about 19 on-wall panels. So 5 to 9, so almost a quadrupling of the panels and the coverage around the wall, right? It's going to be a lot more panels down here. Hopefully that results in a much better sound experience. Again, trying to be mindful to still do it in a way where it looks nice. It looks thought out. It doesn't just like, I'm not throwing stuff all over the place. It still has a nice, clean, symmetrical look to it. We will see. That's obviously going to be a big endeavor for me. That's why I'm not even trying to do it. I just got the panels in like yesterday. I don't have time this weekend anyway. So again, I don't know. Hopefully over the next couple of weeks, I'll get them up. It probably will be another few weeks before I get that part 3 out to listen. When I'm listening, when I have them up, when I can do measurements and really see the difference, I'm gonna do before and after measurements to see, just to have that data point, to see, you know, if even if I can't hear it with my ear, what is actually going on in the space and what it's actually doing. That will be interesting to hear, right? So if that doesn't work, then I know that there's nothing more I can do down here. It would be pretty disheartening because it basically would say that, again, I guess there's certain types of rooms and certain shape rooms or, you know, stuff like that where you would need to really get the impact. I've seen people with dedicated home theaters. I've been in people with dedicated home theaters and their room was nice and dead and, you know, everything. I'm like, man, it's so nice and quiet, but focused and personal. The experience is so immersive. And that's what I would love to get. I can't imagine that it wouldn't be better than it is now. It should improve, right? There's no way getting the ceiling there for my main listening, hitting that first flexion point there, hitting the first flexion point here, getting some treatments back there to kind of stop a lot of just the reflections from bouncing all over the place all crazy. That can't make it worse. It can't even be the same, right? I don't know. What do you think? It got to be better, right? So anyway, that's the plan. Thanks for following me. I know this has been a long video, but I wanted to really lay it out for you guys. So I appreciate you joining, listening. Please see me in the comments. Till next time, 2 Techno Gamer out.